Beneath the colossal wings of military aircraft, a quiet young man toiled, his hands caked in grease, his presence barely registered by the fighter pilots who strode past him. They called him the hangar rat, a dismissive nickname for the apprentice mechanic who seemed to melt into the shadows of the immense hangar. No one suspected the secret life he led, the extraordinary skills he possessed, or the legendary reputation he'd forged far beyond the confines of this dusty airbase. Then, a sleek black Humvee pulled up, and a team of elite Navy SEAL, their faces grim, their mission critical, stepped out. They weren't looking for a mechanic. They were looking for a ghost. A whisper in the wind. A tactical genius known only by a cryptic code name. What happened next would shatter the hangar's mundane routine and reveal the astonishing double life of the quiet boy everyone overlooked. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Alex Boone was accustomed to the pervasive scent of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid that clung to the vast, cavernous space of Hangar 7. It was a familiar, almost comforting aroma that had seeped into his clothes, his hair, and seemingly his very soul over the past 2 years. At 17, he was the youngest apprentice mechanic at this sprawling Air Force base, a fact that often led to him being assigned the most tedious, grimy tasks, the ones that required nimble fingers and a willingness to squeeze into confined spaces. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his slight frame allowing him to navigate the intricate labyrinth of landing gear, engine compartments, and fuselage interiors with an almost uncanny ease. The veteran mechanics, grizzled men with calloused hands and a perpetual squint from years of peering at intricate machinery, mostly ignored him, occasionally barking an order or a dismissive nickname. Hangar rat. They'd grunt, usually when he emerged from the bowels of an F-15, dusted with grime and radiating the faint metallic tang of aviation fuel. Alex didn't mind. He preferred the silent communion with the machines, the intricate puzzles they presented, the satisfaction of coaxing a recalcitrant system back to life. The jets, in their immense metallic grandeur, were his true companions. He was currently deep within the belly of a C-130 Hercules transport plane, his headlamp casting a focused beam onto a complex array of wiring and hydraulic lines. The air was thick with dust and the faint hum of distant machinery. His wrench slipped, scraping against a cold metal surface, and a thin line of oil smeared across his cheek. He grunted, adjusting his grip, his brow furrowed in concentration. The world outside, the vibrant blue of the desert sky, the distant roar of jets taking off and landing, faded into a muffled background. Here, under the shadow of the colossal wings, it was just him and the intricate mechanics of flight. The heavy, resonant clang of the hangar bay doors opening abruptly pierced the usual industrial symphony of the base. Alex, startled, bumped his head against a low-hanging pipe, wincing. He rarely paid attention to who came and went. The constant flow of military personnel, a blur of uniforms and hurried footsteps. But the abrupt silence that followed the door's opening was unusual, drawing his attention. The typical hustle and bustle of Hangar 7 seemed to momentarily cease, replaced by an unnerving stillness. He slowly extricated himself from the tight space, his muscles protesting slightly, and slid out from beneath the fuselage. He wiped his hands on a greasy rag, squinting as his eyes adjusted to the brighter light of the main hangar floor. A sleek, black Humvee, its windows tinted, sat gleaming in the center of the vast space, an anomaly among the camouflaged military vehicles and utilitarian ground support equipment. Around it, a group of figures, silhouetted against the bright light filtering in from the open doors, stood with an almost unnatural stillness. They were not the usual pilots or ground crew. Their posture, their equipment, the very aura they exuded, spoke of a different kind of discipline, a more specialized, lethal purpose. As his eyes adjusted, Alex realized they were a team of Navy SEAL. Their dark tactical gear, devoid of rank insignia, clung to their powerfully built frames. Their faces, partially obscured by the shadows and the brim of their caps, were stern, focused, radiating an intensity that made the air around them crackle. The mechanics who had been working nearby had paused, their tools idle, their gazes fixed on the newcomers, with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Even Chief Harding, a gruff, no-nonsense veteran who usually barked orders like a drill sergeant, stood unusually quiet, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. One of the SEAL, a towering figure with broad shoulders and an air of quiet authority, stepped forward. His voice, when it came, was deep and resonant, cutting through the hangar's sudden quiet. "We're looking for someone," he stated, his gaze sweeping across the hangar, seemingly taking in every detail, every person, with a quick, efficient assessment. "He's usually around here. A young man, quiet. You might call him." He paused, a slight hesitation in his voice. "Nomad." Alex felt a strange prickle of unease. Nomad. The code name. It was rarely used, reserved for a specific, clandestine part of his life. A part that had nothing to do with wrenches, engine diagnostics, or the smell of aviation fuel. He watched, an unsettling awareness creeping over him, as the SEAL gaze continued its measured sweep, eventually landing on him. The SEAL team leader, a man whose presence commanded immediate attention, took another step forward. His eyes, the color of stormy seas, narrowed slightly as they locked onto Alex. There was no recognition, no surprise, only a calm, unwavering focus. He wasn't looking for a mechanic apprentice. He was looking for something else entirely. Then, the leader's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Nomad," he repeated, his voice carrying a new, almost reverent tone. "It's good to see you again." He then turned to the astonished Chief Harding, a surprising warmth entering his voice. "Chief, my apologies for the intrusion. We have an urgent, off-the-books request. We need to borrow your finest." He paused, then gestured towards Alex, his gaze still fixed on the young man who stood frozen, covered in grease. A silent enigma in the heart of Hangar 7. "We need Nomad. He trained us in desert recon. He's a legend, kid." Alex Boone, the hangar rat, felt a profound sense of cognitive dissonance. The words hung in the air, echoing off the steel girders of the hangar, mingling with the phantom scent of jet fuel. Nomad, legend, he trained us. These were phrases that belonged to a different world, a secret life he had painstakingly kept compartmentalized, far removed from the mundane reality of busted hydraulic lines and temperamental avionics. The other mechanics, who had dismissed him as a mere cog in the military machine, now stared, their mouths agape, their eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and burgeoning awe. Chief Harding, a man rarely at a loss for words, simply blinked, his usual gruff exterior momentarily shattered. Alex felt the grease on his face, the grime under his fingernails, a stark contrast to the immaculate, almost pristine appearance of the SEAL. He was a teenager, still growing into his lanky frame, with hands that were more accustomed to the delicate intricacies of wiring than the rough handling of military-grade weaponry. Yet, here stood a group of elite warriors, the very epitome of tactical prowess, referring to him, a hangar rat, as a legend. The absurdity of the situation threatened to overwhelm him. A strange, nervous laugh bubbling up in his chest, quickly suppressed. The SEAL leader, seeing Alex's stunned expression, offered a small, reassuring nod. "It's been a while, Nomad," he said, his voice softer now, almost empathetic. "Last time we met, you were showing us how to rig a comms relay from recycled sand filters in the middle of a sandstorm." He chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "Still got that knack for improvisation, I trust?" Alex finally found his voice, a hesitant, slightly raspy whisper. "Commander, sir," he began, attempting to inject some formality into the surreal situation. I think there's a misunderstanding. I'm just Alex Boone. I'm an apprentice mechanic here." He gestured vaguely at his grease-stained uniform, hoping to emphasize the undeniable truth of his current identity. The commander, whose name Alex now vaguely recalled as Commander Vance, simply raised an eyebrow. "Oh, there's no misunderstanding, Alex. Or rather, Nomad. We know exactly who you are. The quiet genius who can turn a handful of desert dust and broken electronics into a fully functional surveillance network. The kid who taught us how to disappear into thin air, even when we thought we already knew every trick in the book. Vance's gaze swept over the stunned mechanics. Chief Harding, with all due respect, your mechanic apprentice here is one of the most brilliant, resourceful, and utterly indispensable assets our country has. And we need him. Now. Chief Harding, still recovering from the shock, stammered. Sir, with all due respect, I had no idea. Alex here, he's just a kid. He fixes planes. He gestured helplessly at the C-130 behind them, as if the very presence of the massive aircraft would somehow explain away the SEAL's fantastical claims. Vance's expression remained serious, his tone firm. And he does it exceptionally well, Chief. A natural affinity for systems, for understanding how things work, how they can be made to work, even when all logic dictates they shouldn't. That's why he's nomad. He can adapt, improvise, survive in any environment, and make the impossible possible. He turned back to Alex, his voice taking on a more urgent tone. We have a critical mission, Nomad. Deep behind enemy lines. We need your unique skills for environmental assessment, clandestine traversal, and unconventional resource acquisition. Simply put, we need you to help us get in, stay hidden, and get out. When everything else fails. Alex felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, a pull towards the clandestine world he had left behind, a world where his intellect and unconventional skills were not just valued, but essential for survival. It was a stark contrast to the repetitive, albeit satisfying tasks of the hangar. The choice, though startling, felt almost inevitable. He looked at the faces of the other SEAL, their expressions unreadable, yet expectant. He saw recognition in their eyes, a silent respect for the reputation he had unknowingly built. The journey into his secret life had begun years ago, long before he became the hangar rat. Alex had been a solitary child, more comfortable with schematics and circuitry than playgrounds and social cliques. His prodigious talent for understanding complex systems, for tinkering with electronics, for seeing patterns where others saw chaos, had manifested early. He could fix anything, build anything, from discarded household appliances to intricate radio transmitters, cobbled together from spare parts. His family, the loving, often struggled to understand his quiet intensity, his deep immersion in his projects. It was during a summer science camp, held at a remote, almost clandestine government facility, that his talents truly blossomed. A chance encounter with a visiting researcher, a man who recognized Alex's innate genius, had opened doors to specialized training. He had been introduced to the world of unconventional warfare, of survival in extreme environments, of adapting technology for clandestine operations. He had learned desert reconnaissance, not from textbooks, but from practical, immersive simulations in unforgiving terrains. He had developed a knack for identifying subtle environmental cues, for navigating by the stars, for rigging improvised communication networks from scavenged materials. He wasn't trained in combat, but in the art of making a team disappear, of making them operate where no one else could. He had been given the codename Nomad for his ability to adapt and thrive in any environment, to move unseen, to leave no trace. His age, initially a concern, had quickly proven to be an advantage. He was underestimated, easily overlooked, allowing him to observe and analyze without drawing attention. After a few crucial, successful, and highly classified projects, he had been quietly released, advised to live a normal life, to continue his technical studies, but always with the understanding that his unique skills might be called upon again, if the need arose. The Air Force apprenticeship had been a logical step, a place where he could continue his passion for mechanics, blend in, and remain under the radar. Until now. Alex looked from the stern, expectant faces of the SEAL to the bewildered expression of Chief Harding. The decision, though startling, felt inevitable. This was who he was, deep down, beyond the grease and the wrenches. This was Nomad. He slowly nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his other life, his true calling. "All right, Commander," he said, his voice gaining a new resolve, a quiet confidence that startled even himself. "What's the mission?" Vance's expression softened, a ghost of a relieved smile touching his lips. Good. We knew we could count on you, Nomad. Get cleaned up. We'll brief you in the Humvee. And Chief, he added, turning to the still stunned Harding, I assure you, he'll be returned in one piece. Probably with a few more surprising skills than when he left. As Alex walked towards the hangar's small, utilitarian changing rooms, the whispers started, a low hum of speculation and awe from the mechanics. Nomad, he heard one of them murmur, disbelief lacing his voice. A legend. The hangar rat had vanished, replaced by a ghost from a clandestine past, a young man whose quiet exterior concealed a world of extraordinary skills and untold secrets. The desert, he knew, awaited, and with it, the undeniable pull of a life far more dangerous and far more exhilarating than he had ever let on. The smell of jet fuel still clung to him, but now, it was mixed with the faint, invigorating scent of impending adventure. The cramped interior of the Humvee was a stark contrast to the cavernous hangar, a confined space that amplified the tension crackling between the elite SEAL team. Alex, now shed of his greasy overalls and dressed in a more appropriate, albeit still slightly oversized, tactical suit provided by the team, sat opposite Commander Vance. The air was thick with the scent of gun oil and concentrated purpose. He felt a familiar, almost exhilarating surge of adrenaline, a stark awakening from the comfortable monotony of his life as a mechanic. This was the world where his mind truly thrived, where his unconventional thinking was not just tolerated, but celebrated. Vance's voice was low, clipped, and precise as he began the briefing. Our target is a rogue cell operating out of a remote, uncharted valley in the Al-Kalam Desert. They've acquired sensitive intelligence, potentially compromising an upcoming covert operation. He pointed to a satellite map displayed on a ruggedized tablet. The topography was unforgiving, a maze of jagged rock formations, treacherous wadis, and shifting sand dunes. Intel suggests they have a rudimentary but effective counter-surveillance system in place. Standard aerial reconnaissance is a no-go. Ground approach is suicide for a full team. Alex leaned forward, his eyes scanning the digital map, his mind already processing the geological features, the potential hidden routes, the prevailing wind patterns. Heat signatures will be an issue in the wadis during the day, he murmured, almost to himself. Sand composition around the northern ridge could cause slippage for tracked vehicles, and the prevailing wind patterns suggest a narrow window for infiltration from the east before the dust devils kick up. Vance nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Precisely, Nomad. Which brings us to you. Your understanding of desert environments, your ability to predict and adapt to unpredictable conditions, is unparalleled. We need you to go in ahead of the main team, reconnaissance, assess their security, identify weaknesses in their perimeter, find us a way in, a way out, and, if possible, disable their comms without comms, alerting them. Alex felt a familiar spark of intellectual challenge. This wasn't about brute force. It was about finesse, about blending into the environment, becoming a ghost. Disabling comms without alerting them will require localized electromagnetic interference, highly directional, to avoid collateral detection, he mused, already formulating a plan. Or, a physical compromise of their primary antenna, if I can get close enough. What's the expected power source for their system? Another SEAL, a burly man with a scarred eyebrow named Breach, grunted from the seat beside him. We're talking about a group that lives off the grid, Nomad. Probably scavenge generators, solar panels, maybe even a wind turbine if they're particularly resourceful. Nothing high-tech. Then a localized EMP burst might be feasible, Alex said, his mind already racing through the components he'd need, the modifications he'd make to existing equipment. But it would need to be contained, almost surgical. Or a physical approach. It always comes back to the approach. Vance smiled, a brief, genuine flash of appreciation. That's why you're Nomad. You see the problems before we even know they exist. Your mission will be solo infiltration. You'll have standard desert survival gear, enhanced comms, and a specialized kit for your unique crawl. Talents. He gestured to a large, nondescript duffel bag resting at Alex's feet. You'll be dropped approximately 50 clicks out, at dusk. Your window for infiltration is 6 hours. After that, the sandstorms become too unpredictable for extraction. Alex nodded, absorbing every detail, his mind already calculating trajectories, probabilities, potential contingencies. The fear that might have gripped a less experienced person was absent, replaced by a focused calm, a clarity that came from years of operating on the fringes. His training had been rigorous, unconventional, and often solitary. He wasn't a combat operative, but a master of stealth and environmental manipulation. He had learned to read the desert like an open book, to understand the subtle shifts in wind, the telltale signs of hidden wadis, the way sunlight played tricks on the eyes. He could identify tracks invisible to the untrained eye, distinguish the whisper of shifting sand from the murmur of distant voices. His mind was a vast database of geological data, meteorological patterns, and improvised engineering solutions. He had spent months, often alone, in simulated desert environments, perfecting his craft, pushing his physical and mental limits. He had learned to fashion tools from rock, purify water from dew, and build shelters from scavenged debris. He understood how to remain unseen, how to move without leaving a trace, how to blend into the barren landscape until he was nothing more than a mirage. The nickname Nomad was not just for his ability to traverse, but for his profound connection to the environment, a symbiotic relationship that allowed him to flow with its rhythms rather than fight against them. As the Humvee bumped along the desolate desert road, the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. Alex felt a surge of exhilaration, a deep satisfaction at returning to the world where his skills truly mattered, where his unique perspective could literally mean the difference between life and death. He pulled out the contents of his specialized kit, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. There were miniature sensors, highly sensitive thermal imaging devices, a compact, adaptable drone, and a series of seemingly innocuous electronic components that, in his hands, could be transformed into powerful tools for disruption or communication. Remember, Nomad, Vance's voice broke through his thoughts. Absolute stealth is paramount. If you're compromised, the mission is jeopardized. We're relying on your judgment. Any unexpected variables, any sign of heightened security, you pull out. No heroics. Your life is valuable. More valuable than this specific intel, in the long run. Alex met Vance's gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the trust placed in him. Understood, Commander. Nomad always comes home. The Humvee eventually pulled to a stop at a desolate, unmarked location, the only sound the whisper of the wind across the sand. The air, crisp and cool, carried the faint, earthy scent of desert flora. Alex stepped out, the vast, empty expanse of the desert stretching out before him, an endless sea of sand and shadow, punctuated by the jagged silhouettes of distant mountains. The stars, untainted by city lights, blazed with an almost blinding intensity in the darkening sky. He adjusted the straps of his pack, the familiar weight a comforting presence against his back. He took a deep breath, inhaling the raw, untamed essence of the desert. He was no longer Alex Boone, the hangar rat. He was Nomad, a ghost in the wind, a master of the unseen, embarking on a journey into the heart of the unknown. The desert awaited, and he, Nomad, was finally home. The quiet mechanic apprentice had shed his disguise, ready to embrace the dangerous, exhilarating reality of his true calling. The desert at dusk was a canvas of muted colors, the harsh midday glare replaced by soft, shifting hues of deep purple, burnt orange, and shadowy gray. Alex, now fully immersed in his persona as Nomad, moved with a fluidity that belied his age. Each step was deliberate, silent, his specialized boots leaving minimal trace on the fine, shifting sand. The weight of his pack, though substantial, felt like an extension of his own body, its contents meticulously organized for quick access. He was a creature of the desert, attuned to its subtle rhythms, its deceptive vastness. His enhanced comm system, a compact device nestled against his ear, crackled softly. Nomad, this is Hammer. You are at drop point. ETA to target 0600. Maintain comm silence unless absolutely critical. Good luck. The voice of one of the SEAL, crisp and efficient, faded, leaving Alex alone with the vast, ancient silence of the desert. He began his traverse, not in a straight line, but in a serpentine path, utilizing every natural undulation of the terrain, every shadowed crevice in the rock formations, as cover. His eyes, preternaturally sharp, scanned the landscape, identifying potential ambush points, hidden paths, and the faint, almost imperceptible signs of human activity. He moved like a whisper, a phantom in the deepening twilight, his senses heightened, his mind a finely tuned instrument of observation and analysis. His specialized kit, a compact marvel of his own design, was invaluable. He deployed miniature, passive thermal sensors at strategic intervals, creating a perimeter of invisible eyes that would alert him to any approaching heat signatures. His compact drone, no bigger than his palm, hummed almost silently as it ascended, its multispectral cameras relaying crisp, detailed images of the terrain ahead to his wrist-mounted display. He observed the subtle patterns of animal tracks, distinguishing the hurried scurry of a desert fox from the deliberate tread of a human foot. He analyzed the wind, feeling its subtle shifts, using it to mask his approach, to carry away any faint sound he might inadvertently make. As night fully descended, the desert transformed. The harsh sun's dominance gave way to the overwhelming brilliance of the stars, a breathtaking tapestry of constellations that Alex used as his primary navigational guide. The air grew colder, crisp and dry, carrying the faint, earthy scent of hardy desert flora. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft crunch of his boots on the sand, the whisper of the wind, and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of his drone. Hours passed. Alex covered vast distances, his stamina remarkable, fueled by a relentless focus and a deep understanding of energy conservation. His mind was a constant whirl of calculations, risk assessments, and contingency planning. He identified a narrow wadi, a dry riverbed, that seemed to lead directly towards the suspected location of the rogue cell, offering natural concealment and a less arduous path, but his instincts, honed over years of unconventional training, cautioned him. The wadi was too obvious, too convenient. It felt like a trap. He paused, finding cover behind a cluster of ancient, wind-sculpted rocks. He pulled out a specialized geological scanner, a device he had personally modified, and ran it over the wadi floor. The readings confirmed his suspicions. Subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in the subsurface density, consistent with buried tripwires or pressure plates. A primitive, yet effective, booby trap designed to deter direct approach. His quiet observations, his intuitive understanding of the environment, had saved him invaluable time, and potentially his life. He rerouted, choosing a more arduous path across a rocky ridge, a route that would demand more physical exertion but offered greater security. His agile body scaled the uneven terrain with practiced ease, his fingers finding purchase on ancient, weathered rock faces. He was acutely aware of his surroundings, every shadow, every sound, every subtle shift in the air. As he neared the suspected location, the landscape became more rugged, dominated by a series of formidable rock formations, natural fortresses that offered excellent defensive positions. His drone, flying at a higher altitude, began to pick up faint thermal signatures. He lowered its altitude, bringing it in closer, its advanced optics piercing the darkness. On his wrist display, a rudimentary compound slowly came into view. It was nestled deep within a natural rock amphitheater, well concealed from aerial view. There were makeshift shelters, a few parked vehicles, and, most importantly, a tall, spindly antenna array, barely visible against the dark sky. The target. Alex zoomed in, his eyes scrutinizing every detail. He noted the irregular patrol patterns, the lack of sophisticated lighting, the single dimly lit guard post. Their security, while present, was unsophisticated, relying more on the natural defenses of the terrain than on advanced technology. This played directly into Nomad's strengths. He descended the rocky ridge, moving with an almost unnatural silence, his shadow merging with the deeper shadows of the rocks. He avoided the open ground, preferring the cover of the uneven terrain, his senses alert to every subtle shift in the environment. The faint murmur of voices, the crackle of a distant fire, now reached him, carried on the night wind. He needed to get closer, to assess the antenna array, to determine the most effective method for disabling their communications. He found a hidden crevice in the rocks, a natural blind spot that offered perfect concealment. From there, he deployed a series of highly sensitive audio sensors, tiny, almost invisible devices that he could stick to rock surfaces. The sensors began to relay the sounds of the compound to his comms earpiece, allowing him to monitor their conversations, to gauge their numbers, their routines. He spent the next hour meticulously observing, analyzing. He saw two men regularly patrol the perimeter, their routes predictable. He noted the location of a generator, its faint hum barely audible above the whisper of the wind. He identified a blind spot in their lighting, a patch of deep shadow that offered a potential infiltration route. His plan began to solidify. The localized EMP burst was still an option, but a physical disablement of the antenna would be more conclusive, less likely to leave a detectable signature of advanced technology. It would require getting impossibly close, risking detection, but the reward outweighed the risk. He would use the natural cover of the terrain, the shifting shadows, and the predictable patrol patterns to approach the antenna. As he made his final preparations, adjusting the specialized tools in his pack, a sudden, almost imperceptible shift in the wind carried a new scent to him, faint but unmistakable. The metallic tang of unburnt diesel fuel, and something else, something metallic and cold, hinting at recent vehicular movement. His internal alarm bells rang. This was new. This was unexpected. He quickly pulled up his drone's feed, its cameras sweeping over the compound. And there it was. Hidden behind a natural rock outcropping, almost perfectly camouflaged, was a large military-grade transport truck, its engine still radiating a faint heat signature. It hadn't been there in the earlier scans. And it looked heavily armored, a different class of vehicle than the older, civilian models he had noted earlier. This changed everything. A transport truck implied a larger operation, perhaps a pending movement of the sensitive intelligence. Or, worse, the arrival of reinforcements. His mission, initially focused on infiltration and comms disruption, suddenly became far more critical, far more time-sensitive. He needed to update Vance to convey this new, dangerous variable. His calm silence was now secondary to the urgency of the new intelligence. He reached for his comms, his fingers flying over the controls. "Hammer, this is Nomad. Urgent update. New asset detected. Heavy transport vehicle, recently arrived. Indicates potential movement of intel or reinforcements. Recommend immediate reassessment of OPP." The silence on the other end was unnerving, prolonged. Then, Vance's voice, sharp with concern, cut through the static. "Nomad, copy that. Stand by. What's your current status? Are you compromised?" "Negative, Hammer. Still undetected. But this changes the window. Recommend adjusting infiltration strategy. Physical disablement of comms is higher risk now. Consider a more rapid approach. Intel." Vance's voice, now crisper, more urgent, responded. "Understood, Nomad. Hold position. Do not engage. We're re-evaluating. Await further instructions." Alex pulled back from the crevice, his mind racing. The silent hum of the desert night suddenly felt fraught with unseen dangers. The peaceful landscape now seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the storm. The hangar rat was gone, replaced by Nomad, a critical cog in a high-stakes military operation. His instincts, his training, and his unique intellect now the only things standing between success and debate. Catastrophic failure. The quiet apprentice was about to prove himself a legend, not just to a SEAL team, but to the unforgiving crucible of the desert itself. The desert night intensified around Alex, the stars overhead blazing with an almost preternatural brilliance that seemed to mock the growing tension within him. The recent arrival of the heavy transport truck at the Rogue Cell's compound was a critical variable, disrupting all prior calculations. It hinted at a significant shift in the enemy's operational tempo, demanding immediate adaptation and decisive action. The very air seemed to crackle with an unspoken urgency. Alex remained in his concealed position, his eyes glued to the compound through his magnified optics. The newly arrived vehicle, robust and darkly camouflaged, was indeed a military transport, capable of carrying personnel or significant cargo. Its presence suggested either a planned extraction of the sensitive intelligence or, more ominously, the arrival of additional, possibly more heavily armed personnel. This wasn't just a simple communications disruption mission anymore. It was rapidly evolving into a race against time, a high-stakes interdiction. His comms earpiece remained silent, Vance's instruction to hold position ringing in his ears. But Alex's instincts screamed for action. Waiting risked losing the intel entirely, or allowing the enemy to reinforce their position, making any future interdiction far more difficult and costly. His internal clock was ticking, a relentless countdown to an unknown event. He continued his meticulous observation, noting every subtle movement within the compound. The number of guards hadn't increased, but their patrols seemed more frequent, more alert. The dim light from the guard post flickered, casting long, shifting shadows that played tricks on the eyes. He noted a subtle change in the faint aroma carried on the wind, the distinct smell of freshly brewed coffee, suggesting prolonged vigilance. He pulled out his compact drone again, sending it on a higher, wider sweep, pushing its thermal imaging capabilities to their limits. He wanted to ascertain if the truck was being loaded or unloaded, if there were any larger heat signatures indicating a significant number of new personnel. The drone's feed showed subtle activity around the truck, figures moving, but nothing definitive. The resolution, from this distance and altitude, wasn't quite enough to confirm his suspicions. He needed to get closer, to acquire more precise intel. His mind raced, analyzing the risks of breaking calm silence versus the imperative of acquiring critical information. Vance had emphasized stealth, but also his judgment. The truck was a game-changer, demanding an immediate update, a potential shift in the entire mission profile. He decided to risk a brief, encrypted burst. His fingers flew over the controls of his comms unit. Hamar. This is Nomad. Situation critical. Cannot ascertain exact nature of new asset without closer recon. Requesting permission to advance to secondary observation point. Proximity would allow for full assessment of truck's contents and confirm personnel count. Risky, but vital. End quote. The silence that followed stretched, agonizingly long. Alex held his breath, every nerve ending taut with anticipation. He knew Vance would be weighing the heightened risk against the imperative for immediate, accurate intelligence. Finally, Vance's voice, sharp and decisive, cut through the silence. Nomad, permission granted. Exercise extreme caution. Do not engage unless directly compromised. We are moving up our ETA. Contingency Plan B is now active. We'll be on your 6 as soon as physically possible. A surge of relief, followed by a jolt of renewed adrenaline, coursed through Alex. Contingency Plan B meant a more aggressive, faster approach from the SEAL team. It meant they were trusting his judgment, acting on his intel. He was no longer just a recon asset. He was a vital part of the tactical decision-making. He began his cautious advance towards the secondary observation point, a rocky outcrop that overlooked the compound from a slightly higher, yet still concealed, vantage point. He moved with heightened awareness, his senses acutely tuned to every whisper of the wind, every rustle of sand, every faint shadow. The terrain became more treacherous, requiring agile leaps and careful handholds, but Alex's desert training had prepared him for far worse. He felt a profound connection to the ancient, unforgiving landscape, a symbiotic relationship that allowed him to move with an almost primal efficiency. As he closed the distance, the details of the compound became clearer. He could now make out the faces of the guards, their expressions grim, their movements tense. They were expecting something, or someone. The air was thick with their unspoken anticipation. He could hear snippets of their conversations, low murmurs in a language he recognized as a local dialect. They spoke of the package and the rendezvous at dawn. His blood ran cold. The package almost certainly referred to the sensitive intelligence, Rendezvous at dawn meant they planned to move it out of the valley before the SEAL team could interdict. The truck wasn't just for reinforcements, it was the getaway vehicle. The clock was ticking faster than he had anticipated. He finally reached the secondary observation point, a narrow ledge carved into the rock face, offering an unobstructed view of the compound, particularly the transport truck. He quickly deployed his more powerful, handheld thermal imager. He focused it on the truck's cargo bay, scanning for heat signatures. The results hit him like a physical blow. There were no human heat signatures in the cargo bay. Instead, he saw a distinct, large, and unusually strong thermal signature emanating from a heavily shielded container within the truck. It was a type of signature he recognized from his classified briefings, a signature associated with high-grade, miniaturized nuclear material. It wasn't just sensitive intelligence. It was a nuclear device, or components of one. His breath hitched, a cold dread seizing his gut. This wasn't just about a rogue cell and compromised intel. This was about a potential WMD, a threat that could destabilize an entire region, plunge the world into a catastrophic crisis. The mission had just escalated from critical to apocalyptic. He immediately reached for his comms, his fingers trembling slightly. "Hammer, this is Nomad. Immediate and critical update. The package is not intel. Repeat, not intel. Thermal analysis indicates high-grade nuclear material, heavy shielding, but signature is undeniable. They're moving it at dawn. This is an immediate extraction and interdiction scenario. Threat level? Catastrophic." End quote. The silence on Vance's end was even longer this time, fraught with an unbearable tension. Then, Vance's voice, now devoid of any pretense of calm, was sharp, urgent, his command barking through the earpiece. "Nomad, confirm that reading. Are you absolutely certain?" "Affirmative, Hammer. Signature matches known WMD profiles. There's no doubt. This is a game changer. You need to interdict them before they leave the valley. I can try to disrupt their vehicle, but it's heavily armored. My comms disruption capabilities are minor compared to a direct strike." "Nomad, pull back to your primary extraction point," Vance ordered, his voice now a tense roar. "Do not engage. This is beyond your scope. We're diverting all available assets. Full tactical response. Get clear of the area, now." Alex looked down at the compound, at the heavily armored truck, at the silent, deadly threat it contained. He knew Vance was right. This was beyond his scope. He was an unconventional asset, a ghost, not a frontline combatant. But the image of that thermal signature, the chilling reality of a nuclear device in the hands of a rogue cell, burned in his mind. He couldn't just stand by. He couldn't just retreat. He made a split-second decision, a choice that went against his direct orders, against the very principles of his training, but aligned with a deeper, more primal sense of responsibility. He had to act. He had to buy the SEAL time. He had to create a distraction, to slow down that truck, even for a few precious minutes. His mind raced, discarding the EMP, discarding the comms disruption. He needed something physical, something impactful, something that would stop a heavily armored vehicle without necessarily destroying it, without risking detonation. He scanned the surrounding terrain, his eyes locking onto a precarious stack of massive boulders on the ridge above the wadi, directly overlooking the only clear exit path from the compound. An idea, reckless and daring, began to form. He could destabilize the boulders, trigger a controlled rock slide, blocking the wadi. It would create a choke point, force the truck to slow, perhaps even stop it entirely, buying precious time for the SEAL team. It was a high-risk maneuver, putting him in direct danger, but it was the only option he could devise that would have an immediate, decisive impact. "Hammer." Alex cut back into the comms, his voice firm, resolute, ignoring Vance's previous order to retreat. "Nomad initiating tactical disruption, targeting primary exit path, wadi corridor, controlled rock slide, will create choke point. Buy you time, proceed with plan B, Nomad out." "Nomad out." He heard Vance's furious, desperate shout. "Nomad negative. Do not engage. That's a direct order. Nomad, do you copy?" But Alex had already cut the comms, his focus now entirely on the precarious rock formation. He moved with a renewed urgency, scaling the ridge towards the unstable boulders. He pulled out his specialized tools, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, identifying the key points of geological weakness, the precise fissures he needed to target. He was no longer just an observer, a ghost. He was an active participant, a single solitary force against a catastrophic threat. The hangar rat, the quiet mechanic, was about to become the fulcrum of a desperate, high-stakes battle, risking everything to stop a world-altering catastrophe. The desert wind whispered around him, a silent witness to the extraordinary courage of a young man who chose to defy orders, to embrace danger, to become the legend they already believed him to be. The air around Alex crackled with a new, terrifying intensity as he began his ascent towards the precarious rock formation. Commander Vance's furious, desperate shouts to disengage echoed in his mind, the sharp counterpoint to the insistent pounding of his own heart. He knew he was defying a direct order, potentially risking his life and the entire mission. But the image of that thermal signature, the chilling realization of a nuclear device, propelled him forward with an unyielding resolve. Some orders, he knew, had to be broken when the stakes were this high. He scaled the rough, unforgiving rock face with a furious agility, his specialized climbing gear biting securely into the ancient stone. The wind whipped at his face, carrying the distant murmur of activity from the compound below, now a low hum of malevolent intent. His mind was a whirlwind of calculations, assessing the rock density, the structural integrity of the fissures, the precise point of impact needed to trigger a controlled, yet impactful, landslide. He wasn't trained as a demolitions expert, but his intuitive understanding of physics, of leverage, and of the raw power of geological forces gave him a dangerous edge. He finally reached the base of the towering stack of boulders, their immense mass casting daunting shadows against the starlit sky. These were not small rocks. They were colossal, jagged monoliths, seemingly held in place by a fragile balance of geological pressures. A miscalculation here, a wrong move, and he wouldn't just trigger a landslide, he would be buried beneath it. He pulled out a specialized kinetic tool, a compact device designed for precise force application. He had used it before, in controlled environments, to dislodge obstacles, but never on this scale, never with such immediate, catastrophic consequences if he failed. His hands, though calloused from years of working on aircraft, now trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the immense pressure of the moment. He meticulously identified the critical stress point, a narrow fissure at the base of the largest boulder, where centuries of wind and water erosion had created a weakness. He braced himself, positioning the kinetic tool with pinpoint accuracy. The risk was immense. He was exposed, vulnerable, and the rogue cell below would soon be on the move. Nomad to hammer, Alex risked. A quick, desperate comms burst, his voice strained with exertion. Initiating disruption. Prepare for impact. No time for finesse. This is going to be messy. He didn't wait for a response, severing the connection before Vance could issue another furious order. He pressed the activation button. A low hum vibrated through the tool, rapidly escalating into a piercing whine. Then, with a sudden, bone-jarring jolt, a concentrated burst of kinetic energy impacted the fissure. The rock face groaned, a deep, ominous sound that reverberated through the ground beneath him. Dust plumed outwards, acrid and blinding. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Alex held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears, a frantic drumbeat of dread. Had he miscalculated? Had he failed? Then, with a deafening roar that swallowed the night, the ground beneath him began to tremble violently. A crack, jagged and monstrous, snaked rapidly across the face of the largest boulder. With a sickening lurch, the entire stack began to shift, slowly at first, then gaining terrifying momentum. Dust, thick and suffocating, billowed outwards, obscuring the stars, transforming the night into a swirling vortex of grit and shadow. Alex scrambled backwards, scrambling for cover, his senses overwhelmed by the thunderous roar of tumbling rock. He shielded his head with his arms, feeling the ground shake violently beneath him, the very air vibrating with the immense raw power of the cascading boulders. He felt a sharp sting as a stray rock fragment slammed into his arm, but he barely registered the pain. His focus was entirely on the wadi below, on the effectiveness of his desperate gamble. Below, in the compound, chaos erupted. The guards, startled by the sudden, earth-shattering roar, scrambled for cover, their shouts echoing in the pandemonium. The transport truck, which had just begun to roll towards the wadi exit, screeched to a halt, its headlights suddenly illuminating a terrifying, rapidly forming wall of rock and dust that now blocked its path. The wadi, their primary escape route, was utterly, irrevocably choked. Alex, coughing, spitting dust, risked a glance over the edge of his meager cover. The wadi was indeed impassable, buried under tons of rock and debris. The truck was trapped, its path blocked. He had succeeded. He had bought the SEAL team precious time they desperately needed to interdict the nuclear device. But his success came at a steep price. The rockslide had stirred up an enormous amount of dust, a choking, blinding cloud that swirled through the valley, carried on the now turbulent wind. And the noise, the thunderous roar of the falling boulders, had undoubtedly alerted every single person within miles. His stealth, his most valuable asset, was now utterly compromised. He was exposed. He heard the frantic shouts from the compound below, the sudden burst of automatic gunfire, sharp cracks that ripped through the night air. They were responding, sweeping the perimeter, their attention now focused on the source of the disruption. He was no longer a ghost. He was a target. He pulled out his comms, risking another burst, his voice raw, hoarse with dust and exertion. "Haver, this is Nomad. Disruption successful. Wadi blocked. Truck is stalled. My position is compromised. Enemy on high alert. Proceed with Plan B. Engage now." There was no response. The comms were either jammed by the enemy's panicked countermeasures, or the sheer geological upheaval had disrupted the signal. He was alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. He could hear the pounding footsteps, the rapid shouts growing closer, echoing off the rocks. They were coming for him. His tactical suit, designed for stealth, not combat, offered little protection. He had no heavy weaponry, only his specialized tools and a small concealed sidearm that was more for desperate last resorts than sustained engagement. Alex knew he had two options: attempt to flee, risking being hunted down in the vast exposed desert, or find a defensive position and attempt to hold out until the SEAL team arrived, if they arrived at all. His training, his very nature as Nomad, leaned towards evasion, towards disappearing. But his conscience, the profound weight of the nuclear threat, demanded that he remain, that he continue to be a deterrent, to ensure the truck did not move. He scanned his immediate surroundings, desperately searching for cover, for an advantage. He spotted a narrow, almost invisible fissure in the rock face, a vertical shaft that seemed to lead downwards, deeper into the earth. It was a perilous, claustrophobic route, but it offered concealment, a potential escape, and a chance to observe the enemy's movements from a safer vantage point. He squeezed into the narrow opening, his pack scraping against the rough rock, his body protesting the confined space. He descended into the cool, dark embrace of the earth, the frantic shouts and gunfire from above slowly fading into a muffled, distant roar. He was deep within the heart of the mountain, a clandestine refuge, a temporary sanctuary. As he descended, the light from above diminished, finally disappearing, plunging him into absolute darkness. He activated his headlamp, its beam cutting a stark path through the inky blackness, revealing the rough, uneven walls of the fissure. He moved carefully, testing each handhold, each foothold, his senses alert to every subtle shift in the rock, every faint sound that might indicate a hidden danger, or, more importantly, a new path forward. He eventually reached a small, horizontal chamber, a natural cavern deep within the rock. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint, earthy scent of ancient stone. He was safe, for now. But he was also trapped, cut off from the surface, with a furious, heavily armed enemy above him, and a catastrophic threat still lurking in the stalled truck below. He activated his comms again, desperately trying to re-establish contact with Vance. Nothing. Only the persistent, frustrating static. He was truly alone. The hangar rat had defied orders, triggered a landslide, and was now trapped deep within the earth, a solitary figure facing an impossible challenge. That as Nomad, a legend forged in the crucible of impossible odds, he knew one thing: he wouldn't give up. The game had changed, the stakes astronomical, and he, Alex Boone, the quiet mechanic, was now at the very epicenter of a desperate, world-altering struggle. His ingenuity, his resilience, and his sheer courage were his only weapons. And the dawn, with its promise of a rendezvous for a nuclear package, was fast approaching. The suffocating darkness of the subterranean chamber pressed in on Alex, amplifying the silence, broken only by the ragged rhythm of his own breathing. The absence of comms, the knowledge that he was truly alone against a determined, wheel-armed enemy, was a chilling reality. But fear, though a persistent companion, was quickly superseded by a surge of desperate ingenuity. He was Nomad, and Nomad adapted. He took a moment to assess his immediate surroundings. The chamber was small, roughly circular, its walls damp and uneven. A faint, almost imperceptible current of air hinted at other passages, deeper within the earth. He activated his specialized multispectral scanner, sweeping it across the rock face. The scanner, designed for subterranean mapping, revealed a complex network of fissures and narrow tunnels branching off from his current location, a geological maze that promised both escape and potential dead ends. His tactical advantage lay in his concealment. The enemy would be searching the surface, and likely the primary wadi entrance. They wouldn't expect him to burrow underground. This bought him time, precious minutes to devise a new strategy. He pulled out his compact tablet, reviewing the compound's layout and, more importantly, the details of the stalled transport truck. He needed to find a way to disable it, permanently, before the SEAL team arrived. A rockslide was temporary. A disabled vehicle was a definitive victory. But how to do it from deep within the earth? His eyes widened as an idea, audacious and risky, began to form. He recalled a rarely used, highly specialized tool in his kit, a miniaturized seismic disruptor. It was designed for controlled geological sampling, for creating minute, localized vibrations to analyze rock strata, but with some radical modifications. With a significant increase in power and a targeted frequency, it could potentially induce catastrophic vibrations in a vehicle's engine block, causing critical failure without an explosive signature. It was a long shot, but it was his only shot. The challenge was twofold: getting close enough to the truck to deploy the modified disruptor effectively, and powering the device, which would require an immense surge of energy. He began to search the walls of the chamber, looking for specific mineral deposits, for any geological anomaly that could serve as an improvised power source. He was looking for quartz, for iron ore, for anything that could act as a rudimentary conductor or capacitor. His hands, nimble and precise, moved with practiced efficiency as he began to dismantle components from his comms unit, his drone, even sacrificing the light source from his headlamp. He began to reconfigure them, his mind a whirlwind of circuitry diagrams, energy flows, and electromagnetic principles. The rhythmic scratching of his tools against metal, the faint whirring of repurposed circuits, filled the silence of the cavern. Hours blurred into a relentless cycle of tinkering, calculating, and improvising. Alex worked with a furious intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration, the taste of dust still clinging to his tongue. He found small veins of copper ore in the rock, painstakingly extracting them, using them as conductors. He catabolized the lithium-ion batteries from his drone, pushing their output far beyond their intended limits. He was building a bomb of vibrations, a silent, unseen weapon, designed to strike from below. As he worked, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor vibrated through the rock walls. He paused, his senses on high alert. It was too subtle to be a natural seismic event. He pressed his ear against the cold rock, listening intently. The tremor was rhythmic, low, and deep. It was the sound of heavy machinery moving on the surface above him. They were trying to clear the wadi. They were trying to free the truck. Panic surged through him, a cold knot in his stomach. He was running out of time. He pushed faster, his fingers flying over the delicate circuitry, connecting wires, adjusting frequencies. The air in the confined chamber grew thick with the metallic tang of heated components, the faint smell of ozone. He finally finished. The modified seismic disruptor, a crude, yet potentially devastating device. It was an amalgamation of scavenged parts, held together by sheer ingenuity and desperate hope. It was far more powerful than its original design, a testament to his unique ability to push technology beyond its intended limits. Now, he had to get close. He activated the multispectral scanner again, focusing on the ceiling of his chamber, directly above him. The scanner revealed a thin stratum of weaker rock, a potential path upwards, directly beneath the wadi where the truck was stalled. It was a perilous climb, unstable and claustrophobic, but it was his only route to the target. He secured the modified disruptor to his chest rig, ensuring it was accessible for immediate deployment. He then began his ascent, squeezing into the narrow vertical shaft, his body scraping against the rough rock, dust raining down on him. The tremors from above grew stronger, the rhythmic grinding of heavy machinery echoing through the rock, signaling their relentless progress. He could also hear muted voices, closer now, the frantic shouts of the rogue cell members. As he ascended, the passage became narrower, the air thinner, filled with the pervasive scent of damp earth and ancient stone. He pushed himself upwards, muscles straining, his mind focused entirely on the truck, on the nuclear device it contained. He was a rat in a maze, but a rat with a purpose, a lethal, improvised weapon. He finally reached the top of the shaft, a small, concealed opening just beneath the surface of the wadi. He could hear the grinding roar of heavy machinery directly above him, the clatter of loose rock, and the shouts of men. He was precisely where he needed to be. He carefully, cautiously, pushed his head through the opening, peering out. He was hidden by a large fallen boulder, a remnant of his earlier rock slide, offering perfect concealment. Directly in front of him, less than 20 feet away, was the rear of the transport truck, its massive engine rumbling, struggling to push through the debris. Men were scrambling around it, desperately trying to clear the path, their faces grim, their movements hurried. This was his moment. He quickly pulled out the modified seismic disruptor, its improvised wiring humming faintly. He aimed it, focusing its unseen energy directly at the truck's engine block, relying on his precise knowledge of its internal mechanics, its vulnerabilities. He took a deep, steadying breath, his heart pounding in his chest, a frantic drumbeat that echoed the imminent danger. He pressed the activation button. A high-pitched, almost imperceptible whine emanated from the device. A silent, deadly wave of concentrated vibrations, aimed directly at the heart of the truck's engine. He could feel the ground beneath him tremble, the rock resonating with the unseen force. For a moment, nothing happened. The truck's engine continued to roar, its tires spinning uselessly against the debris. Then, a faint, metallic groan emanated from the truck's undercarriage, followed by a sudden, violent shudder that rippled through its massive frame. The roar of the engine faltered, sputtered, and then, with a final, agonizing wheeze, died. Silence. A profound, unsettling silence descended upon the wadi, broken only by the frantic shouts of the men and the distant, almost imperceptible hum of the SEAL teams approaching Humvees. Alex pulled back, his heart pounding, a grim satisfaction settling over him. He had done it. The truck was disabled. The nuclear device was stalled. He had bought them the crucial time needed. But the silence was short-lived. The men around the truck, realizing their vehicle was dead, began to look around, their eyes scanning the surrounding terrain, searching for the source of the unseen attack. One of them, a burly figure with an assault rifle, spotted the disturbed rocks near Alex's position, his gaze narrowing. He raised his rifle, aiming directly at the concealed opening. "Hammer, this is Nomad." Alex gasped into his comms, not waiting for a response, his voice laced with urgency. "Target neutralized, vehicle disabled, my position compromised. They're on to me. Need immediate extraction. I'm pinned down." He heard the rapid crackle of gunfire as bullets slammed into the rock above him, sending sprays of rock fragments raining down. He was exposed. He was vulnerable. The hangar rat, the quiet mechanic, had just pulled off an impossible feat, stopping a nuclear threat with sheer ingenuity. But now, the legend, Nomad, was trapped, facing the fury of a desperate, heavily armed enemy, with no way out and precious little time before they found him. The battle was far from over, and this time, it was a fight for his very survival. The relentless hail of gunfire slammed into the rock above Alex, sending a shower of fragmented stone and dust raining down on his already aching body. He pressed himself deeper into the narrow crevice, the rough rock abrading his skin, trying to become one with the unyielding stone. The muffled shouts of the rogue cell members grew louder, their heavy footsteps drawing closer, their determination fueled by the sudden, inexplicable demise of their escape vehicle. He was trapped, utterly exposed, and his heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. His comms remained stubbornly silent. He tried again, a desperate, raspy whisper. "Hammer! Nomad here, taking heavy fire, pinpointing my position, need immediate NGH." A ricocheting bullet fragment grazed his cheek, a sharp sting that brought a trickle of warm blood. He grit his teeth, the metallic taste of fear and adrenaline filling his mouth. He knew his time was running out. They would find the opening, flush him out, or worse, come down after him. He had bought the SEAL time, but now he was paying the price. He instinctively reached for his sidearm, a small, reliable pistol, its cold weight a stark contrast to the sophisticated tools he usually wielded. It was a last resort, a desperate measure against overwhelming odds. He was a mechanic, a strategist, a ghost, not a soldier. But in this moment, he was fighting for his life. He scanned the immediate vicinity of his hiding spot, his mind racing, searching for any possible escape route, any desperate contingency. The fissure was a dead end, leading only deeper into the solid rock, with no discernible exit. He was cornered. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the frantic gunfire and shouts, a familiar, yet entirely unexpected roar that vibrated through the very ground beneath him. It was the distinct, powerful thrum of a helicopter, low and fast, approaching from the east. Not just any helicopter. The sound was too precise, too powerful. It was the distinct thud-thud-thud of a specialized military assault chopper, one he knew the SEAL often deployed. Hope, sharp and piercing, surged through him, momentarily eclipsing the fear. They were here. Vance had heard him. They were coming for him. The rogue cell members, initially focused on his position, also heard the approaching chopper. Their shouts turned to frantic cries, their gunfire sporadic, confused. They knew what that sound meant, reinforcements. But not for them. The roar grew deafening, directly overhead. Then, the distinct, thunderous thump of a heavy-caliber weapon, a cascade of rapid-fire bursts, ripped through the air, followed by a torrent of screams from the compound below. The chopper was engaging them, directly, ferociously. Alex, still pinned down, heard the frantic shouts of the enemy, the desperate return fire, the metallic screech of vehicles being strafed. The battle had begun, a furious, close-quarters engagement in the heart of the wadi. He could also hear the distinct, rhythmic thud of heavy boots, the low, rapid-fire commands, and the focused snarl of men in combat. The SEAL were on the ground. He risked another glance out of his crevice. The scene below was a maelstrom of gunfire and dust. The chopper hovered overhead, its powerful spotlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating the chaos. The rogue cell members, caught off guard, were scrambling for cover, their positions compromised by the overwhelming aerial assault. And then, he saw them. Shadows moving with impossible speed and precision, sweeping through the compound, engaging the enemy with ruthless efficiency. The SEAL. He heard Vance's voice, now crystal clear through his comms, sharp with command, yet laced with a palpable relief. "Nomad, we're here. Provide overwatch if possible. Do not move until we confirm your position." "Hammer, this is Nomad," Alex shouted back, his voice hoarse, exhilarated. "I'm pinned down in a crevice, rock face above the truck. Facing north. They know my general location. Copy that, Nomad. Stay put. Breach and Spike are coming for you. Vance ordered, his voice already fading as he barked commands to his team. Alex hunkered down, clutching his pistol, his eyes scanning the chaos below. He could see two of the SEAL, their movements impossibly fast, flanking the perimeter, their weapons spitting fire, neutralizing the remaining threats. He saw Vance himself, leading the charge towards the stalled transport truck, his presence commanding, utterly focused. He heard the crunch of heady boots approaching his position, not from the direction of the enemy, but from above, from the ridge he had scaled earlier. Two figures materialized from the swirling dust, their tactical gear making them almost invisible against the dark rock. It was Breach and Spike, their faces grim, their weapons ready. "Nomad!" Breach's voice, a low rumble, reached him. "You all right, kid?" Gave Vance a heart attack with that little stunt. "I'm fine," Alex gasped, relief washing over him, easing the tension that had gripped him for hours. "Truck's dead. Nuclear package confirmed. Inside a shielded container." Spike, his movements fluid, quickly found the opening to Alex's crevice. "All right, Nomad. Let's get you out of there. And then, you're going to tell us exactly how you managed to stop a military transport truck with what? A glorified rock?" There was a hint of incredulous awe in his voice. Breach extended a gloved hand, his grip strong and reassuring. Alex took it, pulling himself out of the confined space, blinking in the sudden, chaotic light of the battle. He was covered in dust, his uniform torn, a thin streak of blood on his cheek, but he was alive. And the mission, thanks to his audacious gamble, was on its way to success. As they moved quickly towards the center of the compound, the last of the enemy resistance crumbling under the SEAL's relentless assault, Alex saw Vance standing beside the stalled transport truck, a grim satisfaction on his pale face. The cargo bay doors were open, revealing the heavily shielded container, its ominous thermal signature still evident even in the pre-dawn light. Vance looked up, his gaze sweeping over Alex, a mixture of anger, relief, and profound respect in his eyes. "Nomad," he said, his voice firm. "You disobeyed a direct order. That's a court-martial offense, kid." He paused, his lips twitching into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "But you also saved this mission. You stopped a potential catastrophic event. You proved yourself beyond anything we could have hoped for. You are indeed a legend." Alex, exhausted but exhilarated, simply nodded. He looked at the disabled truck, at the secured container, and then back at the SEAL, these hardened warriors who had once dismissed him as a mere mechanic. They were a team, and he, the quiet hangar rat, had played a crucial, indispensable role in their success. As the sun began to peek over the jagged mountain peaks, casting long, golden shadows across the now secured compound, the distinct thud-thud-thud of another helicopter grew louder. This one was larger, a transport chopper for extraction. Vance clapped Alex on the shoulder, a rare, genuine gesture of camaraderie. "Let's get you home, Nomad. We have a debriefing to attend. And then, perhaps, a much-needed explanation for how you turn rocks into tank traps." He grinned, a flash of genuine amusement in his eyes. Alex felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a quiet pride blooming in his chest. He was no longer just a boy who fixed planes. He was Nomad, the ingenious ghost of the desert, the unlikely hero who had stared down an impossible threat and emerged victorious. The hangar, with its familiar scent of jet fuel, now felt like a distant memory, a place he would return to, but never quite the same. His secret life had merged with his public one, irrevocably altering the perception of the quiet hangar rat. He had truly become a legend, not in whispered tales, but in the harrowing crucible of a desert night, where his mind, his courage, and his unique talents had ultimately saved the day. The desert had witnessed the unveiling of a true hero, a young man who redefined what it meant to be indispensable. The flight back to base was a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration. Alex sat quietly in the transport helicopter, the rhythmic thrum of the rotors a comforting lullaby after the chaos of the desert. He watched the barren landscape pass beneath them, now bathed in the soft glow of dawn, a stark contrast to the brutal darkness of the night's operation. His arm throbbed faintly where the rock fragment had grazed him, a tangible reminder of the perilous hours he had just endured. Commander Vance sat opposite him, his expression less grim now, a sense of relief palpable in his posture. He occasionally shot Alex a look, a mixture of sternness and a grudging admiration, as if still trying to reconcile the unassuming mechanic apprentice with the audacious, mission-saving nomad. The other SEAL, some tending to minor injuries, others simply resting, regarded Alex with a new respect. Their earlier awe solidifying into a quiet acknowledgement of his extraordinary capabilities. The jokes about the hangar rat were gone, replaced by a profound, unspoken recognition of his status as a vital, if unconventional member of their elite world. Upon their arrival at the sprawling Air Force Base, they were immediately ushered into a secure, underground debriefing room. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the hum of sophisticated electronics. A panel of high-ranking military officials, their faces etched with the weight of global security, sat around a long, polished table. Alex, still dusty and disheveled from his ordeal, felt a surge of nervous energy. He was accustomed to the silent language of machines, not the scrutinizing gaze of powerful men. Vance began the debriefing, his report concise, professional, yet punctuated by moments where he recounted Alex's actions with an almost incredulous tone. He detailed the initial reconnaissance, the detection of the transport truck, the chilling realization of the nuclear material, and finally, Alex's decisive, unauthorized action to block the Wadi, buying the SEAL team. Critical time for interdiction. He painted a picture of Nomad, not as a mere asset, but as a critical, indispensable force multiplier. When it was Alex's turn to speak, his voice, though still slightly hoarse, was clear and precise. He explained the mechanics of the seismic disruptor, the improvised power source, the geological assessment that led to his decision to trigger the rockslide. He spoke with the quiet confidence of a man who understood his craft intimately, translating complex technical details into layman's terms with effortless clarity. The generals listened, their expressions shifting from skepticism to dawning comprehension, and finally, to profound awe. "So, you're telling us, young man," one grizzled general, his voice gruff but tinged with reluctant admiration, asked, "that you, Day, an apprentice mechanic, managed to disable a heavy military transport vehicle, likely carrying a WMD, with what amounts to a modified rockhammer?" Alex nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk touching his lips. "It was a modified seismic disruptor, sir, designed to exploit the resonance frequencies of the engine block. The principles are sound, if unconventional." The general leaned back in his chair, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his weathered face. "Unconventional indeed, and remarkably effective. You, young man, have potentially averted a global crisis. What do you say to that, Chief Harding?" he asked, turning to the still stunned chief who had been called into the debriefing. Chief Harding, his face a mixture of pride and utter bewilderment, simply shook his head. I always knew Alex was good with machines, sir. Best apprentice I've ever had. But a legend. Nomad. I'm still wrapping my head around it, sir." His voice held a genuine, almost paternal sense of wonder. The debriefing continued for hours, delving into every detail of the mission, every contingency, every improvised solution. Alex answered every question with the same quiet confidence, his analytical mind dissecting the events with remarkable clarity. By the end, the initial skepticism had completely vanished, replaced by an undeniable respect for his unique abilities. After the debriefing, as the high-ranking officials congratulated him, their words of praise echoing in the stark room, Alex felt a strange sense of detachment. He wasn't doing it for the accolades or for the recognition. He had acted because he had to, because his skills, his unique perspective, demanded it. He was Nomad, and Nomad was essential. Vance approached him, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "Alex," he began, his voice dropping to a softer, more personal tone, "I still have to put you down for disobeying a direct order. That's protocol." Alex met his gaze, a quiet understanding passing between them. "I understand, Commander. Some orders are difficult to follow." Vance chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "Indeed. But I'll also be putting you down for a commendation. A significant one. Your actions tonight, they were extraordinary. And moving forward, Alex, your role will be expanded. Consider this a standing request. When we need Nomad, we'll be calling." Alex felt a surge of exhilaration. This was it. The full integration into the life he had secretly yearned for. A life where his unique talents were truly utilized, where he could make a tangible, profound difference. The hangar rat was shedding his skin, fully embracing his identity as Nomad. He returned to Hangar 7 later that day, the scent of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid welcoming him back. But this time, it felt different. The other mechanics no longer looked at him with casual indifference or dismissive amusement. Their gazes held a mixture of awe, curiosity, and a dawning respect. The whispers, no longer of Hangar Rat, were now of Nomad, of a legend. Chief Harding, standing by a massive transport jet, simply nodded at him. His usual gruffness was replaced by a quiet solemnity. "Alex," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "heard you had quite the field trip." He paused, then extended a calloused hand. "Good work, son. Proud of you." Alex shook his hand, feeling the genuine warmth in the chief's grip. This was different. This was acceptance, recognition, not just for the mechanic, but for the man, for Nomad. He looked around the hangar, at the familiar planes, at the tools he loved, and a profound sense of purpose settled over him. He would still fix planes. For now. It was a good cover, a quiet place to hone his craft, to remain unseen. But he knew, with a quiet certainty, that his true calling lay beyond the hangar doors, in the vast, unforgiving expanses of the world, where his unique abilities as Nomad would be called upon to face challenges only he could conquer. He walked towards his workbench, the faint scent of jet fuel a constant reminder of his dual life. He picked up a wrench, its familiar weight comforting in his hand. He was still Alex Boone, the mechanic apprentice. But he was also Nomad, a whisper in the wind, a tactical genius, a legend. And the world, unknowing, would rely on him again. His journey had just truly begun.